Hey everyone, welcome to episode 247 of 15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff. And last week we did, what was it? Proper adultery. The week before that was acceptable murder?
Yep.
Was that correct? Okay. And then this week, proper payback. And now I heard this message just for transparency's sake. I heard the message on Sabbath. I was there. And then tonight we are going to be launching a new worship program during first service. March, is it 16th?
March 6th.
6th. Oh, not the one. March 6th. So it's upcoming. So stay tuned for more details on that. But we were running through this, and so we did last week's message just as a trial run through to kind of help us get this whole the flow of the program, things like that, ready so that when we do go live on March 6th, things will hopefully flow very well, and it kind of gave us an idea. So we went through this message again tonight, and then as I had been preparing for this, there are 1,000 ways that you could go with this, because this is something that I feel like every single one of us, since we were kids, understand this message. Like, this isn't a message for, easy adultery. The kids might not totally get that one in all of its ramifications. But this one, I just felt like every one of us, and just reading the opening sentence or paragraph, was a couple sentences as normal. It said, "You punch me, so I punch you back." In the Bible, it's called the lex talionis, or the law of retaliation. Of course, one of the problems is that if you punch me, I don't want to just punch you back. I want to punch you back just a bit harder than you punched me. Well, and maybe I want to punch you back a lot harder than you punched me, but that's besides the point. Rather than revenge, how do we move to reconciliation? Jesus' teaching about proper payback was meant to stretch us, and oh boy, it really does stretch you when you start looking at the different things that he had to say about this. And I guess that's why the name of the series is Jesus Doesn't Make It Easy. But this might even be pushing the limits of good taste, Andy, just a little bit. Because I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I've been accused of being a hothead in the past, and I would not I would not disagree with that. I'll be honest. The Maigret temper in Wisconsin circles is a little bit legendary from not just myself, but some uncles, my grandfather. The Sons of Thunder come to mind when, yelling and, getting upset, these kinds of things. These were the norm. And so I just feel like so much of this, when it's like, yes, I know what I'm supposed to do, but then I feel like, well, if I just kind of keep it under control a little bit more than I did last time, if I don't blow up, and maybe if I just don't use bad words. I mean, I lost my temper, but I didn't say bad things. And I could have said, and you run this list off in your head, or I could have done, or I could have. And it's like we're reasoning our way back to, I just lost my temper and maybe I yelled. And sure, I thought some things, but I didn't say them. And that's not what Jesus is talking about. That's not enough for what we're talking about here, is it?
No, it's not a bad start, but
so how do we work towards what he's asking us to do? This eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Essentially, was the punishment needs to fit the crime, but that was just the basic of it. And sometimes I think we're okay with that, but it wasn't. It never gave us this other thing to just go, I need to get revenge.
Well, Jesus pushed us way beyond the lex talionis, that's for sure. Because he actually expects his followers to not be interested in retaliation. No revenge. But
you said, and Jesus is going to say that our best life isn't one of just limiting our vengeance to tit for tat, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, but rather that our best life is one lived without resentment and with a spirit of non-retaliation. Okay, Andy, because some of us might not know, what exactly is a spirit of non-retaliation? Because it sounds good, but I don't know if I've ever lived truly with this in it. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, it's sort of I mean, if we're relying on, if we're expecting ourselves to come to the table with it, we're going to be disappointed. Uh,
Another one of
but
those.
but it the whole concept of a person's wanting retaliation versus forgiveness. So I can't forgive them. I want them to hurt. I want them to suffer. I want to retaliate in some way. It's the Hatfields and the McCoys, and it's World War I and II. I mean, it's little things and big things. And so, how to move beyond, and of course, Jesus' illustrations really help the practice of it. He's basically saying, absorb, receive insult, and just forgive for the insult.
He didn't know about social media, did he, Andy?
No, he didn't have it then. Thank goodness for him. The whole idea, not pushing back, not retaliating, taking the insult is that first one. The what's the second one? Not being willing to lay down our rights.
Right.
If we get sued, they had a right to their cloak, and he's really just saying, don't be about having to guard your rights all the time. Don't feel like you have to have your rights. William Barclay, I quoted him in the full sermon. Says, a Christian is one who sort of comes to a place where they sort of forget they have any rights at all.
The quote was, the Christian thinks not of his rights, but of his duties, not of his privileges, but of his responsibilities. The follower in front of Jesus is the person who has forgotten that they have any rights. Living in a country like America, where every day we are reminded not only of the rights that we are given by our, endowed by our Creator, these kinds of things, but also the rights that could be at risk, might be at risk, are at risk. We're going to take those rights from you. That seems like so not even countercultural. That just seems otherworldly. Like, this is crazy. This goes against all we could possibly believe in as Americans.
Well, I think, let's not get America confused with Christianity. So.
Well, we could start there.
Yeah, but I think we have to recognize that Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is calling us to our best life. He's saying life in the kingdom is like this, and it's a non-retaliatory. It's a not worry about my rights. It's a go the second mile. It's give to the person who asks from you. So it's a countercultural shift for sure, and relying upon ourselves, we'll never get there.
No, but Andy, people don't deserve all the good we can do.
What?
They don't deserve everything, right? I mean, you said we don't think of it as vengeance toward the one in need when we don't give. We imagine that our refusal to give is noble, that we're somehow protecting the needy from laziness. We're teaching them a lesson. If they would be more industrious and get a job, they wouldn't need to ask for a handout or to borrow. And I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, I've heard that many times from the time I was young till even now. I hear that, and I've heard it from people that I respect a lot, just who see the world this way. And yet, how many times have you done something nice for someone that just needed something? And even if you don't know they need it, right?
Yeah.
They ask, and I've just come to the place in my life where if someone asks, I'm just going to go, you know what, God, I'm going to assume you put them in my path. They need something from me, whether they have plenty somewhere else, they just can't get to it, and they need from me today. I'm not going to judge no matter what it looks like. I'm just going to do it and leave it up to God. And if they spend it on whatever, I have to.
That's a great spirit, Randy, because we're going to talk a little bit about where your treasure is this coming week.
Oh. But if you don't, how can you ever do it without questioning it or wondering or giving this like, I did something good, or I just have to assume that that's what God wants, and I just have to submit, or I'm going to resent. I'll be honest. I will resent. I will figure out a way, or the devil will figure out a way in my mind to figure out, like, they took you, Randy, that person, or, they're just going to go buy beer. They're going to buy drugs. And I'm like, you know what? If that's what I don't care.
It's really interesting because we'll talk about it a little more this weekend, but when you realize that 70% of the wealth of the world is controlled by about 5% of the population, which is the United States of America population. And then if you're a professional in that population, you're in the top 20% of that 5%.
Oh man.
And so the problem is that, well, I don't want to get too much spoilers for next week, but greed blinds us to itself.
No, it's true.
People come into my office over the years and want to talk about some failing or sin or problem in their lives. I've never had anybody come and say, I really sort of suffer from greed, because greed blinds us to itself.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Well, and the funny part is I resonate with what you're saying as a financial advisor for about 12 years when it comes to retirement savings and just money in general. First off, nobody wants to talk about it. And second is, if you challenge anyone about how much they're saving, the first response always is like, well, I don't make that much money, And it's like, oh, okay. And it's like, for someone who, and you're sitting across the table from someone who makes double what you make or triple what you make. And you're going like, well, I have a family of 4. We're making it. I'm not saying we're rich, but we're getting by, putting a little aside here and there, and, or you look at someone and go, you realize, right? Like just maybe you don't, but so here. You are among the top 0.01% of wage earners on the entire planet. And you're telling me like you can't save $100 every 2 weeks to put in your retirement plan. Is that what you're telling me? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. So I can see where that totally resonates, because that one always got to me. I grew up in a place in the Midwest where it was very much bootstrap mentality, not just for your religion, but listen, we're all blue collar here for the most part. We all go and put in our 9 to 5. We work our overtime when we have to or when we need a little extra money. We don't have a lot of things, but what we have, we worked hard for. And so, why should I give some bum who's just going to waste it doing something else? So I grew up with that, and I grew up with that little Grinch, tight-fisted, worrying about what someone would do with what's something I gave them.
Right.
And now...
And you're protecting them. They don't have to pay you back if you don't loan to them.
Right. Yeah, that part made me, this whole message made me smile in different ways, because when you really stop and think about the times when you've been that person, and we all have, we've been that person in one way or the other. And when you look at the other times when you weren't that person, and now, if I'm horrible. I never have cash on me. So it's like if someone's standing there, if I've got, I'll offer them food. If I've got food in a bag that I haven't touched, I'm like, haven't touched it. If you're interested, if you're hungry, if you want to meet me at the Wawa across the station, I'll get you, whatever you want, your whatever. And for me personally, it's just been people, when I'm pumping gas, I've had more people come up to me and say, I need to get to wherever. And they'll start to give you this story, and I'll just say, that's fine. I'll be there in a second. Let me finish filling up, and I'll be right over. And they're like, well, if you could just give me like $5 or $10 in gas or whatever. I'm like, listen, what do you burn? You burn premium, you burn rate, whatever. Just tell me what you want, and then I'll just fill the tank up and just go, have a great day. Hope you get where you're going. I hope it works out. Do you need some food? No, the gas is good. And so I feel like God has opened up this little thing where people will just feel comfortable enough to come up to me, especially when I'm on the Harley. When I'm on the Harley, you're just pumping your gas, you're outside, and they'll come up and ask you. And I've bought more tanks of gas in the last year, and I haven't gone hungry, and I haven't, it hasn't affected me in the least bit, except to make me realize how good I have it.
Yeah.
And how much I appreciate what God does for me, and it's such a blessing to be a part of it. It's cool when you ask for it, and then God brings you somebody, and you go, oh, and I'm not usually smart enough in the moment to realize it. It usually takes you like, oh, yeah, what happened to you today? Oh, yeah, was that the guy? Oh, yeah, I was praying about that the other day. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Nice one, God. Good job.
Well, I think it's also plays back into freely we have received, freely give. And it's not just our economics, that's where the whole spirit of non-retaliation comes from. God has been non-retaliatory with us. He is, not treated us as our sins deserve, and out of gratitude for what He's done for us, then we can share that with others. And again, I think we have to rely on Christ in us doing that. Certainly we're not going to do it perfectly regularly.
Thank goodness you said that, because I was like, man, if that's the expectation, that I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. I just think it's really hard, though, for us to find a place, and I'm not really sure how you get there. And I'm not saying I'm there all the time or even maybe enough of the time. I don't know. But when you are wronged in certain ways, oh my goodness, put your heels in the ground and I am not budging from this. This is not forgivable. This is.
Yeah. Andy Stanley has a new book out called something about better decisions. Five questions you ask to make better decisions. That's not the name of the book, but the second question is about legacy. And it's a great question for us to ask when we're tempted for payback. Is what story do I want to tell?
Oh, so yeah.
If you think about payback and how good it would feel to get your revenge at that and in the moment, but then after that, what story do you want to tell? Is that the story you want told at your funeral? Is that the story you want your kids to be telling about you? Yeah, he was pretty vengeful.
Wow.
Or do you want to hear a story about, man, I screwed up and he kept forgiving me?
Yeah.
And so I just really think that it's a great sort of stop and check ourselves question. What story do I want to tell?
Man, that one hits home too, especially if you have kids.
Yeah.
And what stories are your kids going to think about when, situations pop up? When you said that, it immediately popped a story into my head, and I won't share it because my girls, they like us to keep everything, and I do too, of course, as private as possible. Don't let your left hand know and don't be prideful, and all those things go into it. But there was a situation we were able to help someone a couple months back. Totally random, it was very uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for people around. I mean, it wasn't uncomfortable for me because that's just usually not who I am. It takes a lot to make me uncomfortable, but people around us were uncomfortable. I think my girls were uncomfortable, and I did something, and afterwards they're just like, Dad, we're so proud of you and we love you for doing that. And I said, oh, I didn't really think about it in the moment. I just did it. And part of me saw myself, an old me from years ago in that person. And it just struck a chord. It was like, this is something we should do.
Yeah.
And the people around us were like, well, you don't have to do that. And I said, well, I know I don't have to do it. What's the difference? Right. It's this, that, and the other. No big deal. But it's true. And even now, Ellie has come up after me and said that. And she's like, Dad, I'm really glad that we helped that person. And that person just seemed like really just having a horrible go of it. And, what do you think of that person's doing right now? And of course, I have no idea. It wasn't even here in town. And I'm sure we'll never run into this person again, hopefully in heaven someday. And that really makes you stop and think that, man, those eyes and those ears and that the legacy that you're leaving, that story you're telling is happening every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
That is so good. That should have been our takeaway. What story do you want to tell, and what legacy do you want to leave?
Yeah.
But it was a good one either way, because I think this has been, when we look at that and we want to be that person that's telling a good story, you're leaving a good legacy. When has someone gone the extra mile for you, and how did that feel? And I think that this is where, if you have that story, you have to look no further than to say to yourself, I want to be, and I want to make someone else feel like this person made me feel in this instance. That's what I want. And for me, that person has continually been my wife. I look back and I remember times, we've been married 21 years now, and there's been so many times when I didn't deserve it. There was times when I did, maybe. And I want to go back and just yell at myself and just let her, go back and just tap her on the shoulder 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and say, I am sorry I was such a jerk. I should have said in that moment that what you did was so amazing and it made me feel so good. And I just, I was too busy, or I just, didn't think of it, or I whatever the reason was, and just let her know how much that meant to us. And so even though my wife doesn't listen to the podcast, she falls asleep whenever I read to her. I guess that my voice is that soothing, I guess. I love you, Heather. I know you're not going to hear this, and I'm sorry for all those times that your extra mile on my behalf went unrecognized and underappreciated, because you are the best. So at least it's out there. Maybe subliminally it'll reach her, but she can never make it through an episode. Even if it was 10 minutes, it wouldn't make any difference. She couldn't do it. So what about you? Tell us about a time when someone went that extra mile for you and how it made you feel, and maybe how that might point you to do that for somebody else and to make them feel that way. As always, let us know. Voicemail or text 407-965-1607 or an email, podcast@wholelife.church. And our final thoughts were in Andy's message this past week. He asked a question, well, will this work? And his answer was yes. Well, of course. The miracle of God's forgiveness of us, the reality that we have not been treated as our sins deserve. God's love deposited in our lives can move us away from repaying evil with evil, and this is why people will recognize us as Christians, by God's love in us. Oh, and this is why people will recognize us as Christians, by God's love in us. What a beautiful picture that is. Yeah. How different our world would be already if we had all taken this to heart. And tonight, something Stanley said in the Loop practice run tonight, he said, do you ever feel like, do you ever feel like if we had just been doing this for, however long already, that we'd already be in heaven? Yeah. And you go, yeah, maybe.
Heaven like, for sure.
All right. So how many more weeks do we have in this series?
Just one more week.
Oh, this is the last one coming up.
Yep.
Stored treasure.
Yep. So everybody's got a little stored treasure.
Ooh.
What do you treasure?
Man, well, I treasure my family, and I certainly treasure my Harley. I'll have to be honest. But that's probably not what we're talking about, is it?
No, probably not. But it might touch on it.
Okay. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week. The countdown to Andy's last podcast with us is still ongoing. And so it's starting to hit home a little bit more each week. And, the last week we might just have to cry a little. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I got 4 sermons lined up for March. Things that people should remember.
Oh,
and so yeah.
Oh, well, that'll be a good series to wrap it all up on.
Things I've talked about the whole time I've been in ministry.
Well, so these
it'll be like a rerun for a lot of people.
So
more time.
These are syndicated messages, and they were pulling them out of reruns. Then
no, they'll all be written new.
Be all new. All right, awesome. All right, that's going to do for this week. So please, as always, every Tuesday evening, don't forget about Speaking of Grace, where you can find the previous week's message, the one we're talking about on each Wednesday morning here, and in that there are the FHC takeaways. Oh, Andy, it's been over a year now. FHC,
yeah, that's right, but I still say it sometimes.
Our whole life takeaways. You'll find each of those in the show notes along with the message. And of course, here every Wednesday next week, 2:48, we'll wrap up Jesus Doesn't Make It Easy with Stored Treasure. Thanks for listening, guys, and have a great week.